All right, so let's go over the practice quiz for your quiz on the Pythagorean theorem converse, and special right triangles. So we'll start by remembering that the Pythagorean theorem is a squared plus b squared equals c squared, where a and b are the legs and c is the hypotenuse. So for number one, we have 20 and 10 for our legs, and x is the hypotenuse. So we have 20 squared plus 10 squared equals x squared. So in order to get x alone, let's first let's figure out what 20 squared plus 10 squared is. So in your calculator, you can actually just do that. So 20 squared, you don't need to take it step by step unless you want to. So 20 squared plus 10 squared is 500. So that means x squared equals 500. So in order to get x alone, we need to take the square root of that. So x equals the square root of 500, which is, so if we take our square root button and then take the square root of the answer, that gets us about 22.36. So our answer to number one is x equals 22.36. All right, number two is a little different because they give us x as a leg and 10 is a leg, and then 14.5 is the hypotenuse. So this time we need to solve for a leg, not the hypotenuse. So in this case, c is 14.5. So we're going to do x squared plus 10 squared equals 14.5 squared. So what we can do here, let's subtract 10 squared. So to subtract 10 squared from both sides. So 14.5 squared minus 10 squared equals 110.25. So x squared equals 110.25. And in order to get x alone, we need to take the square root. So again, square root of our answer. Oops. So square root try that again. So square root of the answer equals 10.5. So x equals 10.5. So that's 1 and 2, kind of your basic Pythagorean theorem questions. So 3 is a little different. We have 2 little right triangles here. This whole triangle is isosceles, which means if this whole thing is 30, then half of it is 15. So that right there, that tiny little, trying to write really small, so that little thing is 15. So now we have a triangle. We have a leg of 15 right here, this right triangle. We have another leg of 33. We need to find the hypotenuse. We know x is the hypotenuse because it's across from the right angle. So what we're going to do here is 15 squared. So 15 squared plus 33 squared equals x squared. So if you're interested in doing as little work as possible on your calculator, something you can do here, so we know in order to get x alone, we're going to need to take the square root of whatever 15 squared plus 33 squared is. So you can do that all in one step on your calculator. So we have this equation here, and we want to get x alone, so let's do the square root of 15 squared plus 33 squared. So x equals 36.25. So number 3, x equals 36.25. You don't have to do it all in one step if you don't want to, but you can. So number 4, we've got 2 right triangles here. So this top one, We have 16 as a leg, 25 as a hypotenuse. Again, we know it's the hypotenuse because it's across from the right angle. We don't know this leg right here. And then for this one, x is here, so we don't know x. 22 is the hypotenuse, and we're going to need this leg. So we're going to have to do 2 steps here. So we need to find this first using the 16 and the 25, and then we can use that side, this pink side here, to find x. So let's find it using the 16 and the 25. So 25 is C in this case because we said it's across from the right angle. So why don't we call this side y? So we'll call this pink side y just to give it another variable. So, all right, let's do that. So we have y squared. That's a leg. So y squared plus 16 squared equals 25 squared. We're going to subtract 16 squared from both sides. So y squared equals 25 squared minus 16. Oops, I ran out of room. Let me get rid of my. So minus 16 squared. Squeeze that in there. All right, so on your calculator, again, you can do that in one step. So square root 25 squared minus 16 squared equals 19.21. So that means y equals 19.21. And we're going to use that now to find x. So I'm going to have to erase this to give myself some room. So we know that y equals 19.21. Let's write that up here so we don't lose it. 19.21. And then I'm going to erase this to do the next part. All right, so the next part, x is a leg, y is a leg, so 19.21 is a leg, and then 22 is our hypotenuse. So let's do x squared plus 19.21 squared equals 22 squared. Subtract this from both sides. And then x squared equals 22 squared minus 19.21 squared. And you can take the square root of this whole thing to get x alone. So the square root of 22 squared minus 19.21 squared is 10.72. So that question was kind of like a 2 in 1. So x equals 10.72. You needed to use one triangle to figure out the missing side in the other triangle. All right, so now on to the word problems. So the library is 2 miles due west of the post office. So let's start drawing that. So first of all, what we need to know is we need to know north, south, west, and east. So the library is 2 miles west of the post office. So let's put the post office here. Actually, let's put the post office here. So post office is here. Library is here. 2 miles west, so 2 miles to the left of the post office. And the zoo is 6 miles north of the library. So the zoo is up here. So that's the zoo. So we're making a right triangle here. 2 miles west, 6 miles north, right triangle. What is the distance from the post office to the zoo? So let's call this x. So now we've got a right triangle here. So x is our hypotenuse. So what we're going to do is 2 squared plus 6 squared. Oops. Try that again. 2 squared. 2 squared plus 6 squared equals x squared. 2 squared is 4, 6 squared is 36. You can use your calculator if you want, but those are kind of easy numbers, so I'm just doing it this way. So 4 plus 36 equals x squared. X squared equals 40. So now let's figure out what the square root of 40 is. So square root of 40 is 6.32. So x equals 6.32 miles. All right, so now we have two vertical posts stand side by side. One is 7 feet tall, 7. One is 17 feet tall, 17. If a 20-foot wire is stretched between the tops of the posts, 20. How far apart are the posts? So we want to know how far apart they are this way. Okay, so let's call that X. So you can see we've kind of made a right triangle here. So from the ground to right here is 7. So we need to know what this side is right here. And we know that this right here is 7 and the whole thing is 17. So in order to find the blue part, we need to do the whole thing, 17, minus this part right here, which is 7. So that leaves us with 10. So the blue side is 10. So now we no longer need the 7 or the 17. You don't need to erase it on your paper, but just to make it a little cleaner, I'm going to erase it on here. All right, so now we've got a right triangle. We have x is a leg, 10 is a leg, and 20 is the hypotenuse because it's across from the right angle. So we've got x squared plus 10 squared equals 20 squared. So x squared equals 20 squared minus 10 squared. So to get x squared alone, I subtracted 10 squared from both sides. And let's just put it in the calculator like that. So in order to get x alone, you need to take the square root of 20 squared minus 10 squared. So let's do that. So square root, oops, not squared, square root of 20 squared minus 10 squared is about 17.32. And our unit is feet. All right, so that's that one. Moving on to the next one, we have a 13.1-inch laptop is featured in a sales ad for $699. This distance is the diagonal distance across the screen. So here's the screen. Diagonal distance is 13.1. If the screen measures 7 inches in height, so this is 7, what is the width? Okay, so the width, let's call the width x. All right, so we have a right triangle here. So across from the right angle is 13.1, so that makes that the hypotenuse, so C. X is a leg, 7 is a leg. So we have x squared plus 7 squared equals 13.1 squared. So again, we're going to subtract the 7 squared from both sides. So x squared equals 13.1 squared minus 7 squared. And then to get that alone, to get the x alone, we can take the square root of that whole thing. And again, you can do this step by step if you prefer. I'm just showing you how you can do it in one step on the calculator. So 13.1, oops, not 131, 13.1 squared minus 7 squared equals 11.07. So this equals about 11.07, and our unit is inches. Okay, so now moving on to Pythagorean converse. So first we need to determine whether the triangle is acute, obtuse, or not a triangle. So in order to rule out not a triangle, we have to figure out first if it's a triangle or not. So the way we do that is we add the two smaller sides. So 3 plus 4, we need to know if that's bigger than 5. I think it's pretty clear that it is because 3 plus 4 is 7, bigger than 5. So it's definitely a triangle. So we can get rid of that option. So now we need to know if it's acute, right, obtuse, or not a triangle. So what we need to check is if 5 squared, how that relates to 3 squared plus 4 squared. Remember, if it's equal, then it's a right triangle. If it's less than, it's acute. If it's greater than, it's obtuse. So 5 squared is 25, 3 squared is 9, 16 is 4 squared. So 25, 9 plus 16 is also 25. So those are equal, which means it's a right triangle. All right, so for number 9, first we need to check 3 plus 8. Is that bigger than 19? So 8 plus 3 is 11. That is not bigger than 19. So that means it's not a triangle, and we're done. So number 10, we need to check that 21 plus 28 is bigger than 32. So 21 plus 28 is 49, which is definitely bigger than 32. So we can rule out not a triangle because it's definitely a triangle. So now we just need to check the Pythagorean converse. So 32 squared. We need to see how that relates to 21 squared plus 28 squared. I don't know what that is off the top of my head, so let's check it out. Let's take out our calculator. 31 squared, oops, not 1 squared, 31 squared is 961. And then let's check 21 squared plus 28 squared. So that's 1,225. So that means c squared is less than a squared plus b squared, which makes this an acute triangle. All right, so last topic is special right triangles. So we've got 45, 45, 90 or 30, 60, 90. So this first one, number 11, is 45, 45, 90. So that means that the two legs are the same. So they give us 8 as a leg. So that means x is also 8. And y is the hypotenuse. So we know in a 45, 45, 90 triangle, the hypotenuse is always equal to a leg times the square root of 2. And that's all you need to do. For number 12, we've got a 30, 60, 90 triangle. So they give us the shorter leg, which means that we can easily find the hypotenuse because the hypotenuse is always 2 times the shorter leg. So it's 2 times 11, which is 22. And x is the longer leg. So since they give us the shorter leg, we can find that too. So the longer leg is always the shorter leg times the square root of 3. And there's nothing left to do there. For 13, this is another 30, 60, 90, except this time they give us the hypotenuse. So we need to do some work to find the legs. So let's start with the shorter leg because we know that the hypotenuse, so 16, is always equal to 2 times the shorter leg, which is x in this case. So in order to get x alone, we just divide by 2. So x equals 8. And then y is the longer leg. So we know that the longer leg is always equal to the shorter leg times the square root of 3. So 8 square root of 3. So for 14, we have a 45, 45, 90, and they give us the hypotenuse this time. So we know that the hypotenuse, so 68, is always equal to one of the legs. The legs are the same, so you could pick either x or y. So the leg times the square root of 2. In order to get that alone, we need to divide by square root of 2, but we don't like to have this radical in the denominator, so we're going to multiply that by the square root of 2 over the square root of 2, which will leave us with 68 square root of 2. And again, these square roots cancel out, so over 2. And one more thing to simplify, 68 divided by 2 is 34. So this is 34 square root of 2. So all that, and we have 34 square root of 2 and y is the second leg, and they're the same, so that's also 34 square root of 2. All right, moving on to these two. So number 15 is another 30, 60, 90. They give us the longer leg, so let's use that to find the shorter leg. So we know that the longer leg is always equal to the shorter leg times the square root of 3. So to get that x alone, we just divide by the square root of 3, and this is one of those nice convenient ones where they give us a square root of 3 here, so they cancel out, and then we're left with x equals 13. And then now we need to find the hypotenuse. So now that we have the shorter leg, we can do that because we know that the hypotenuse is always 2 times the shorter leg, so 2 times 13, which is 26. All right, so last one. We have two triangles here. One of them, so this one is a 45, 45, 90, and this one is a 30, 60, 90. And they only give us this right here. So let's find the legs of this one first. So we know that the hypotenuse, so 2 square root of 2, again, that's the hypotenuse as always because it's across from the right angle. So the hypotenuse is equal to the leg times the square root of 2. So in order to get that leg alone, z, we need to divide by the square root of 2. And conveniently, they gave us a square root of 2, so it just cancels. So that means z is equal to 2. Which also means that this thing, so since this is 45, 45, 90, this z right here is the same as this. So that's also 2. And in this 30, 60, 90 triangle, that 2 is the longer leg. So we're going to use that to find x and y. So let's first find y, because that's the shorter leg. So the longer leg is always equal to the shorter leg times the square root of 3. So that means y, divide by square root of 3 to get it alone. Y is equal to 2 divided by the square root of 3, but we don't like that radical in the denominator. So we need to multiply by the square root of 3 over the square root of 3. And that leaves us with 2 square root of 3 over 3. So that's y. So 2, let's see if I can squeeze that in there, square root of 3 over 3. And now we need to find x. So let's do it over here. So to find x, that's the hypotenuse. And we know that the hypotenuse of the 30, 60, 90, so the hypotenuse is always equal to 2 times the shorter leg, which is y. So 2 times 2 square root of 3 over, 3. So 2 times 2 is 4, square root of 3 over 3. And that's it. So x is 4 square root of 3 over 3. And that's all there is to it.